What if I told you that some of the thoughts you trust the most are the very things holding you back? Think about that. Not your boss, not your past, not your circumstances, not even your failures. Your thoughts. The voice in your head that you listen to every single day. The voice that tells you, you're not ready. You'll probably fail. They're better than you. It's too late. You're not good enough. Now here's the question I want you to keep in your mind until the end of this video. What if that voice is lying? Because if that's true, then most of the fear you've carried, most of the stress you've experienced, and many of the opportunities you've missed may have been built on something that was never true in the first place. And that realization changes everything. Most people believe they see reality clearly, but they don't. They see reality through the filter of their minds, and that filter is often distorted. Your mind doesn't simply observe the world, it interprets it, it predicts, it judges, it exaggerates, it assumes, and many times it creates suffering where none actually exists. Have you ever worried about a conversation before it happened? Have you ever imagined a disaster that never came? Have you ever convinced yourself that someone disliked you without any evidence? Of course you have. We all have. And that's because your brain wasn't designed to make you happy. It was designed to keep you alive. For thousands of years, survival depended on detecting threats. The people who noticed danger first survived. The people who ignored danger often didn't. So your brain developed a negativity bias, a built-in tendency to focus more on problems than possibilities, more on threats than opportunities, more on what could go wrong than what could go right. That bias helped your ancestors survive. But today, it creates a different problem. Your brain treats imagined threats almost like real ones. A future problem can stress you today. An imagined rejection can ruin your mood. A possibility can feel like certainty. And before you know it, your body is reacting to something that only exists inside your head. Your heart races, your muscles tighten, your focus disappears. And all because of a story, not reality. A story. This is where most people lose control. They don't realize that thoughts are not facts. They treat every thought as truth, every fear as prophecy, every doubt as reality. And that mistake quietly controls their lives. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus understood this better than almost anyone. And what's remarkable is that Epictetus didn't learn this from comfort. He learned it from suffering. He was born a slave. He didn't control where he lived. He didn't control his future. He didn't control his circumstances. Yet somehow, he became one of the freest men in history. How? Because he discovered something most people never do. He realized that freedom begins in the mind. While others were controlled by their circumstances, Epictetus focused on controlling his responses. While others obsessed over what they couldn't control, he mastered what they could. Their judgments, their interpretations, their thoughts. One of his most famous teachings was simple. It is not events that disturb us, but our opinions about them. At first, that sounds almost too simple. But think about it. Two people can experience the same event. One falls apart. The other grows stronger. One becomes bitter. The other becomes wiser. The event is identical. The interpretation is different. And interpretation changes everything. Most suffering is not caused by reality itself. It's caused by the meaning we attach to reality. Your mind creates a story and then convinces you the story is true. Imagine receiving a text message that says, "We need to talk." That's it. 4 words. Nothing more. One person reads it and continues their day. Another immediately begins imagining disaster. Am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong? Is something bad about to happen? Hours of anxiety follow. Sleep becomes difficult. Stress rises. Then the conversation happens, and it turns out to be completely harmless. So what caused the suffering? Reality? No. The story. That's the secret. Most people aren't reacting to reality. They're reacting to the stories their minds create about reality. And once you understand this, you begin to see your life differently. You start noticing how often your mind jumps to conclusions, how often it assumes the worst, how often it predicts failure, how often it creates fear, and how often those predictions never come true. The strongest people aren't those who never feel fear. They're the ones who refuse to believe every fearful thought. They create distance. They pause. They observe. Instead of saying, "This thought is true," they ask, "Is it?" That single question can change your life because it creates space between you and the thought. And in that space, freedom begins. Think about how many years people spend trapped by invisible prisons. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of not being enough. Yet most of those fears are built on assumptions, not facts, stories, not reality, stories. And the mind becomes so convincing that we stop questioning it. We assume every thought deserves our trust. But would you trust every stranger who walked into your house? Of course not. Then why trust every thought that walks into your mind? Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every thought deserves your belief. And not every thought deserves your obedience. The moment you realize that, your relationship with your mind changes. You stop becoming a prisoner. You become an observer. You stop reacting automatically. You start choosing consciously. This is what Epictetus understood. He couldn't control everything that happened to him, but he could control what those events meant. And that made him free. Many people today have more comfort than Epictetus ever imagined. More technology, more convenience, more opportunities. Yet they feel trapped. Why? Because comfort does not create freedom. Mental mastery does. A person who cannot control their thoughts will suffer even in ideal circumstances. A person who can control their thoughts can remain strong even in difficult ones. That's why the real battle isn't outside. It's inside. The real enemy isn't always the world. Sometimes it's the story you're telling yourself about the world. So let me ask you again. What if that voice in your head is lying? What if the limitations you believe are not facts? What if the fear you're carrying is based on assumptions? What if the future you're afraid of never arrives? What if you've spent years believing thoughts that were never true? Because the truth is this: your mind lies. Not always, but far more often than most people realize. It exaggerates, it predicts, it assumes, it catastrophizes. And unless you learn to question it, it will quietly shape your entire life. The goal is not to silence your mind. The goal is to stop blindly believing it, to become aware, to become intentional, to become the person who chooses which thoughts deserve power. Because your mind can be your greatest ally or your greatest enemy. The difference is whether you're in control or whether your thoughts are. And that is the lesson Epictetus discovered centuries ago. A lesson that remains just as powerful today. You may not control everything that happens in your life, but you can always control how you respond. And that is where real freedom begins. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to Stoic Wisdom, because mastering your mind may be the most important skill you'll ever learn. And the moment you stop believing every thought you think, you begin taking your life back.